Thanks for tuning in. You're watching ARIRANG News. It's 2 p.m. here in Seoul. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung. The stories we're tracking for you at this hour. A group of directors of South Korean companies operating at the Inter-Korean factory complex in Kaesong travels to North Korea this morning for talks on Pyongyang's recent unilateral wage hike. South Korean military sources reportedly say all defense issues between Seoul and Washington will be discussed at next month's regular defense meeting that will include the controversial issue of THAAD deployment. And the latest data shows that the nation's real unemployment rate hit a record high last month. It's much higher than the general rate of 4.6%. And we begin with a group of South Korean businessmen crossing the border to talk with North Korean officials about Pyongyang's recent wage hike at the Kaesong industrial complex. They have wrapped up a 2-hour-long meeting just about an hour ago and are expected to return later this afternoon. ARIRANG's Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
Departing for the North Korean border town of Kaesong on Wednesday morning, the South Korean businessman said the Kaesong industrial complex must be free of political tensions.
We will explain to the North Korean officials about the problems that can arise from a unilateral revision of regulations in the overall management of the complex and ask for the park to be managed according to previous agreements.
The group's representative blamed anti-North Korea leaflet launches by South Korean activists for stirring up tensions and halting talks between the two Koreas. He said the upcoming leaflet campaign scheduled for March 26th must be called off. The representative added that North Korea's demands, a wage hike for their workers from the current $70 a month to $74, and the revision of regulations are things that could be resolved through dialogue. The joint business park, which was suspended for 5 months in 2013 amid heightened tensions, is the last remaining link of inter-Korean economic cooperation. The businessman said another shutdown would not be in North Korea's interests.
The North Korean government does not want major obstructions to the complex, like a complete suspension of operations. This can be resolved through dialogue.
But still, the companies are in a tough spot, as the South Korean government has warned of legal and administrative countermeasures against firms that abide by Pyongyang's demands. Hwang Sung-hee, ARIRANG News, Paju.
Now, after China and the U.S. made their stance clear this week about the possible deployment of the THAAD U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula, South Korea made its stance clear that it's up to Seoul to decide what's good for the country's national security. Son Jung-in reports.
Just a day after China voiced concerns over the possible deployment of a THAAD missile defense system in South Korea, the United States said China doesn't have a say in the matter.
Well, I find it curious that a third country would presume to make strong representations about a security system that has not been put in place and that is still a matter of theory.
Chinese Assistant Minister of Foreign Affairs Lu Jianchao told reporters in Seoul on Monday that China hopes South Korea will consider Beijing's concerns before deploying the U.S.-led missile defense system. But following talks with senior South Korean officials in Seoul on Tuesday, U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Daniel Russell said THAAD is purely for countering North Korean threats and that its deployment is up to South Korea.
It is for the Republic of Korea to decide what measures it will take in its own alliance defense and when.
South Korean Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se echoed Russell's words while speaking to reporters, but added there were no official talks about THAAD deployment.
As for THAAD, there is currently no development. The government will consider all factors, including security, before reaching a decision that will maximize our national interest.
But as the foreign ministry teeters between Seoul's closest partners, the defense ministry was much more blunt, saying that neighboring countries should not weigh in on South Korea's security policy. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
So we can see that the THAAD issue is stirring up diplomatic tensions between South Korea, the U.S., and China. South Korean military sources say Seoul and Washington will likely discuss the matter next month. So why is THAAD the subject of such great debate? Our Kim Hyun-bin explains.
The U.S. missile defense system known as THAAD is built to intercept incoming tactical and ballistic missiles at a range of up to 200 kilometers. The system uses kinetic energy with a hit-to-kill method that in turn creates an upper-tier defense shield. It's also equipped with a sophisticated radar system that has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers. This is widely considered to be the reason why Beijing is so strongly against its potential deployment to the Korean peninsula, as a radar will be able to cover Beijing and its surrounding areas. However, the U.S. says THAAD will enhance South Korea's ability to deal with Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile threats, as well as enhancing surveillance on the communist regime. But critics see the possible deployment as Washington's attempt to reel in its Asian ally into its missile defense program. South Korea has acknowledged the battery would enhance its national security, but says it has no plans to buy the multi-billion-dollar system. Military sources say the issue will likely be addressed at the South Korea-U.S. biannual integrated defense dialogue set for mid-April in Washington. The sources add that South Korea's Deputy Minister for National Defense Policy, Ryu Jae-sung, and U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, David Helvey, will represent the two sides at next month's meeting. South Korea has stressed on numerous occasions that it's developing its own low-tier missile defense system to protect the country against the North's missile threats. The so-called Korea Air Missile Defense and kill chain systems are set to be implemented by 2023. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And another seemingly uncomfortable subject between the U.S. and China is the China-led Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. At a regular press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said the decision on whether to join the AIIB rests squarely with each sovereign country, including South Korea. But Psaki added that the multilateral institution should closely follow the high standards established at the World Bank and other regional development banks as well. Britain announced last week that it would join the bank, becoming the first Western country to do so, followed by France, Germany, and Italy. A U.S. official has acknowledged that there was a response to the cyber attack on Sony Pictures in November, though he didn't identify the responsible party. Representative Michael McCall, the chair of the U.S. House Homeland Security Committee, said, quote, "There were some cyber responses to North Korea." He said internet blackout in North Korea in December was one of the responses. He did not say whether the U.S. was behind it or not, though there had been speculation that the U.S. may have been behind the outage. Washington accuses Pyongyang of disrupting computers at Sony Pictures Entertainment and leaking internal content, while North Korea denies any involvement. Now, ahead of Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the U.S. this spring, Washington has emphasized the importance of strong relations between Seoul and Tokyo. The White House said U.S. National Security Advisor Susan Rice made the remarks in a meeting with her Japanese counterpart Shotaro Yachi on Tuesday, but did not reveal further details. The two discussed bilateral cooperation on regional and global security issues, including North Korea's missile and nuclear programs and maritime security in East Asia. The agenda and schedule of Abe's visit to the U.S. was fine-tuned as well. The exact date of his trip has yet to be confirmed, but it will be the first visit by a Japanese leader to Washington since 2006. An American Air Force veteran has been charged with trying to join and provide material support to the Islamic State militant group. According to a complaint and indictment recently unsealed, 47-year-old Tayrod Nathan Webster Pugh had been recently fired from his job as an airplane mechanic, and when he was caught trying to cross into Syria via Egypt and Turkey in January. Turkish officials caught the 4-year veteran and deported him back to the U.S. The documents also said federal agents had found internet searches on IS on his laptop and other devices. Pugh is expected to plead not guilty when he is arraigned at a Brooklyn federal court early Wednesday local time. In the year 2012 for Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. Now, President Park Geunhye and leaders of ruling and opposition parties held talks on Tuesday. What was discussed during the meeting came out late Tuesday. The three mostly focused on reviving the economy, but there were some differences, as you can imagine. ARIRAN's presidential office correspondent Choi Yoo-sun has more.
After a brief exchange of greetings with the leaders of the ruling and opposition parties, President Park got down to business, addressing her recent Middle East trip.
앞으로 이 중동 순방의 결실들이 우리 국민과 또 기업들에게 더 큰 혜택으로 또 그래서 다시 한번 경제가 크게 일어나는 초석이 될 수 있도록
She also urged the parliament to swiftly pass pending bills aimed at creating jobs and revitalizing the economy. While promising his party's cooperation, opposition leader Moon Jae-in said that the government's economic and welfare policies have failed to improve the people's livelihood.
We need to change policies and increase household income for growth. I propose first addressing 4 livelihood tasks.
The 4 tasks Moon listed were a significant increase in Korea's minimum wage, generating welfare funding by expanding taxes on corporations and high-income earners, and addressing the problems of rising housing rental prices and household debt. President Park rebutted Moon's claims, saying the opposition's proposed artificial income increase could lead to more taxes and reduce corporate activity. She added the government is already taking measures to handle the 4 tasks listed by the opposition leader. As for improving inter-Korean relations, Moon said Seoul should first seek to boost economic cooperation with Pyongyang and make efforts to hold an inter-Korean summit this year. While President Park has opened a channel to more actively communicate with the leaders of both the ruling and opposition parties, time will tell how Tuesday's meeting will affect state affairs down the road. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
The so-called actual unemployment rate is a record that's been kept since last year. It's different from the general unemployment rate, and data shows that the actual unemployment rate hit a record high last month. Our Shin Se-min has the details.
The nation's unemployment rate hit a 5-year high in February of 4.6%, a jump from 3.8% from January and 0.1 percentage point higher than the year before. Statistics Korea said Wednesday that the high jobless figure comes on the back of seasonal factors. February is when students in Korea graduate, pushing the unemployment rate up that month. In addition, Korea's real unemployment rate in February hit a record high of 12.5% since the data collection began last May. That's 3 times as high as the official jobless rate. The real unemployment rate includes day laborers, people who are looking for a job, those who are underemployed, and those who have given up looking for a job. The figure is much broader than the official unemployment rate, which only accounts for the number of people who want jobs but have failed to get one. Despite the rise in the unemployment rate, the number of jobs created increased as well. Over 370,000 new jobs were created last month compared to the year before. The number of employed people topped some 25.2 million last month, also thanks to seasonal factors, as major local companies hold the first of 2 annual recruiting rounds during that time of the year. The Statistics Office also said more young people and people in their 50s found jobs last month, boosting the employment rate. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
It's not just diplomatic relations between Seoul and Tokyo that have hit new lows in recent years. Trade between the two countries has been on the decline for the past 3 years. Experts say this trend will continue for the time being, with the yen likely to stay weak. Our Kim Min-ji has the story.
Korea's trade with Japan has been heading downhill. According to the Korea International Trade Association, bilateral trade between the two countries came to about $86 billion last year, down 9.2% from a year earlier. Korea's exports to Japan slumped about 7% to $32 billion, while imports fell more than 10% to almost $54 billion. This marks the third straight year that the bilateral trade volume has dropped after peaking in 2011. Preliminary data shows that trade between the two countries also fell almost 14% in the first 2 months of this year to about $10 billion. The decline is mainly being attributed to the weak yen.
The falling value of the Japanese yen has made Korean products less competitive in terms of price in Japan, and that's resulted in lower demand. Japan has also increased production overseas, so imports out of Japan have seen a decline.
Experts forecast the downward trend to continue as Japan's monetary stimulus programs will keep the value of the yen down. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
As part of his push for deep financial sector reforms, Korea's new Financial Services Commission chief has taken the bold step of vowing to strip away a cumbersome regulation. The commission says Chief Im Jong-ryong will eliminate a so-called three strikes system by the end of the year. Financial institutions had complained that the rule hampered their efforts to expand. So what is the system? Under the regulation, entities that received 3 warnings for regulatory violations are subject to a 3-year restriction on pursuing mergers and acquisitions, starting new businesses, and expanding to overseas markets. The U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to clarify the timing for its first interest rate hike on Wednesday local time. The U.S. is now the only country potentially going against the trend of global monetary easing. For more on the market speculation and its impact on the Korean economy, here's ARIRANG's Hwang Ji-hye.
Investors broadly forecast that the U.S. Federal Reserve will signal on a rate rise in June by dropping the word patient from its official policy statement set to be released on Wednesday local time. Improving jobs data is stoking such expectations.
There's been a very clear trend towards improvement. We saw that in the February payrolls that we received recently. So I think the odds are that they will remove patient from the statement, sort of indicating that they're within a couple of meetings of that initial rate hike.
But the surging U.S. dollar that came on the back of such forecasts and the European Central Bank printing more euros is clouding the timing of a rate rise. The soaring greenback erodes the price competitiveness of U.S. exporters in the global market and could hurt the pace of recovery. The Fed's next move also comes in an environment of sluggish global demand and slowing growth, where more than 20 central banks across the globe have eased policy this year to revive ailing economies. And Korea is no exception.
The Fed's decision on its key rate has largely affected Korea's key rate. But now Korea's interest rate is more affected by monetary policies in regions other than the U.S.
There are concerns, though, of a massive capital outflow from Korea in the face of the Fed's possible rate hike and a record low key rate. The good news is that Korea is now less vulnerable to such risks.
Korea continues to post a current account surplus, and this leads to increasing foreign exchange reserves. That will help Korea absorb shocks coming from capital outflows.
The Bank of Korea governor, however, has cautioned against too much optimism, saying the central bank will closely monitor risks related to capital outflows. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
Works by a famous German artist who is known for her emotionally powerful artwork are in display here in Seoul. Our Yoon joins us with more about this very moving exhibition. Good afternoon, Yoon.
Good afternoon. Right. So Käthe Kollwitz is an artist who is known, for, like you said, for very powerful images. She really touched the lives of millions with her works. Now she has shows various things such as people struggling and the devastation of war. And now there's a unique opportunity to see those original pieces here in Korea. Have a look.
A mother, desperate to feed and fend for her children in a country ravaged by war. The image is one of over 50 original works by the 20th century German painter, printmaker, and sculptor Käthe Kollwitz that are being shown at the Seoul Museum of Art. But inside these charcoal sketches, inside the shadows, are hungry children, traumatized mothers, the victims of poverty in World War I, people that artist Kollwitz just couldn't ignore.
After the war, the remaining families had a very hard time. There was no relief in sight, no counselling, and no one to defend them. This artist chose to bring attention to them.
The exhibition is divided into two parts. One, dedicated to the squalid lives of members of the working class prior to 1914, while the latter part shows works that illustrate the living hell experienced by people in Germany in the aftermath of World War I. Kollwitz was a well-recognized and respected artist in the art community, but she went beyond an artist and contributed to humanity, bringing awareness to those left in the shadows of this world.
So does the museum explain how the war experience may have affected her artwork?
They do a little bit of explaining, right? So Kollwitz was actually married to a doctor who tended often to people, the poor people, and so she said that really influenced her work. But also in terms of the war, she actually lost her youngest son to World War I, and you know, of course, you can imagine that really influenced her. She went through depression, but art sort of became her outlet. So she named a lot of works, things such as the sacrifice, the widow, and the grieving parent. So you can really see that in all of her sketches.
So what legacy does the artist leave behind other than her artworks?
Right, so she had a lot of influence even till now, and so there are over 40 different schools named after the artist in Germany, but also there are different books, movies, even modern dance pieces that take inspiration from the artist, either having a character inspired by her or characteristics of Kollwitz. But there's also statues, many statues that she created or statues that were created that were inspired by her works, and a lot of these statues are housed all over Germany that commemorate the war and especially the victims, which is what she really wanted to point out.
I would have to say that she's not well known to, I guess, not too well known in Korea yet, right. So it might be a good opportunity to check out this exhibition.
Right, an excellent opportunity.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, Yoon, for coming in today and sharing your story with us.
You're very welcome.
Hello, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It's generally gray looking today due to the rain clouds hovering over the country. Now, we won't have much rainfall here in Seoul, but it will still be enough to relieve us from these dry weather conditions that we've been having, while a heavy amount of rain is expected down south. Now, currently, a heavy rainfall warning is in effect on Jeju Island, where up to 60 millimeters are expected. Now, the southern provinces will see between 10 to 30 millimeters, while Seoul and the surrounding regions will get about 5 to 10. Now, with that in mind, let's check out the readings for today. Seoul will peak up to 14 this afternoon, while the southern regions such as Gwangju and Busan will get up to 15 and 13 degrees. Moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 20, Dokdo hits down to 10, while Mankungang is a bit snowing with rain at 6 degrees. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's a wrap from us at this hour. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Another edition of ARIRANG News coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time.